Hey everybody, Tom Barnes, stories from the 78. And this one is right smack dab downtown Chicago, specifically the main branch of the Chicago River. I have my friend Doug here. How you doing, Doug?
Very well. Thanks, Tom.
So Doug, you're heading up this push or this event, I should say, to go swimming in the Chicago River. And people are like, I'm sorry, what? Because it's been such a thing of people not to think about that. But the river, in truth, has cleaned up over the years, and it is now suitable for swimming. So much so that in September on the 22nd, starting at 6:45 a.m., you got a swimmer. You're gonna have swimmers in the water swimming like a mile or 2 miles, right?
That's exactly right. You've done your reading, so that's good.
Yes, well, I was just so fascinated by this because the it's not just for funds. This is for a good cause, something near and dear to your heart, to raise money for ALS, correct?
Right, right. And I think you're right. It on the surface of it, Tom, especially for people who've grown up around Chicago and have their perceptions of the river, we all have had.
Yeah,
And
to say the least, right?
Right. And the so yes, we're hosting an open water swim, an event of either 1 mile or 2 mile swimmers on that date, the 22nd of September. And really felt like it was the way to celebrate clean water, celebrate the Chicago River, celebrate the city of Chicago, and so forth. The I run co-founded a charity called A Long Swim, and we use that to raise money for ALS. We borrowed the ALS acronym. We support the Osdenler Lab, that is an ALS research lab over at Northwestern's Feinberg School, the med school at Northwestern. And gee whiz, we've done it for 10 years or more, and raised almost $2 million for it. And boy, the progress that they've made, it's unbelievable what they've done. And it's through, smarts, hard work, collaborations, all of the above, little bit of good luck. And boy, it's very rewarding.
I think in many ways, slightly, it parallels to the progress of the Chicago River in terms
Precisely.
of a place for people to swim in. And I didn't know that back that 100 years ago, swimming in the river was like a thing to do in Chicago. I had no idea,
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there's
Well,
pictures online. It was a whole
sure.
thing.
Well, and the where it started, Tom, was so interesting because it started as a celebration. And the river was, back with your Chicago history, the river was reversed, the flow was reversed in the year 1900. And it really saved Chicago because in the late 1800s, there had been a wave of bacteria-related diseases, typhoid, cholera, some of those kinds of things. And I mean, huge numbers of Chicagoans had died because of those diseases. And the reason was that the Chicago River was spewing junk into Lake Michigan, and that's where the drinking water was coming from. So by reversing the flow, it's now Lake Michigan that flows into the Chicago River. And by 1908, they were so pleased with how clean the river was that they thought, well, we could do swims in here and so on. And you've obviously done your research, but as time went on, they held them for 20 years, and would attract the really highest profile swimmers in the world, along with, according to the reports we've read, 100,000 spectators and people lining the bridges and the buildings and all the rest of the stuff. It was quite a spectacle. And the crazy bit of trivia, the last swim they had was in 1927. And interestingly enough, the winner of that event was Johnny Weissmuller, who was not only from Chicago, but became an Olympian, a five-time gold medalist, and then Tarzan in the movies. So,
Wow. Wow. That is a
yeah,
piece of trivia right there.
isn't that something? Isn't that something? So then by the late 20s, the water quality went south again, and so they couldn't do it anymore. But really, since the 1970s, then the turnaround has been just unbelievable, and so forth. Water quality has improved so much, and so forth. And there's a whole bunch of groups that should take credit for that, not the least of which is MWRD, that created the Deep Tunnel project to divert stormwater and so forth. I think the Clean Water Act that came along in the 1970s, and then groups like Friends of the Chicago River that have really stayed on top of that water quality. So it is it's something to celebrate again.
Absolutely, and it's going to happen, like we said, in September on the 22nd. And is it about 500 participants? That's where it's kind of capped off, right? And it's not just the Joe Schmo you have to know how to swim, because this is a serious swim. It's not, I mean, for perspective, the triathlon Olympic sprint is a 1 mile swim. This is a mile swim or a 2 mile swim, and it goes down the main branch of the river. That's not a small feat to do for somebody who's just a casual swimmer.
No, this is not for the casual swimmer. We've opened the application page on our website, and in 24 hours we've received almost 400 applications. Now, not every one of those 400 will be suitable, as you point out, but it's created a lot of excitement. Oh, another thing that's interesting about it, Tom, is that in addition to all these applications we've received, 24 states are represented. So it's not just Chicago people. I mean, it's
interesting.
24 states of people have applied, and I just couldn't be more thrilled.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, now with the Chicago River, and it's a beautiful river walk, even more opportunity for people to view this race.
Absolutely.
Explain where it starts, where it goes, and then we'll get into the big elephant in the room of the actual water. Still, like, people, I'm sure, are still very much like, wait a minute, they're going to swim in the Chicago River, like the Chicago River. And a lot of people from the burbs who haven't been down to the city in years, who don't know that there's even a river walk. But first, walk me just through the course, if you will.
Yeah, so the river walk is the perfect example, and frankly is really what we're following on this course. So the starting line will be between Clark Street and Dearborn Street, and head east there. Basically take a button hook left at the Wabash Bridge, then swim all the way back to essentially to Wolf Point, basically the Lake Street Bridge. Do another button hook left, and then head back. And the finish line will be at the Clark Street Bridge, which the segment of the river walk between LaSalle and Clark is where they've got those beautiful risers built. As we've told people, it's the city built a stadium just for us. And so that'll be the finish. Now that's a 1 mile loop, and some people will do 2 loops. So it'll be a 1 mile or a 2 mile day.
I like that you said that they build the grand stadium view. I mean, I feel like we should call up Rahm Emanuel, and he'll probably say, "I told you." Because he is a avid swimmer. I know that for a fact, because I used to swim next to him at a club back in the day.
It's funny you mentioned that. We've actually sent out feelers to Ambassador Emanuel to take one of the slots of the swim.
Yeah, if he can swim, that is for sure. He's a competitive guy. I know that too, for sure.
That's right.
But so now the water. I read that you guys are going to continue to test all the way up till race day to make sure that it is in compliance. But even that is something that was just unfathomable to think of in talking about a race all within the Chicago River construct, right? So, just talk about that for folks that might be still curious about it.
It's a great question, Tom, and frankly, the one that is maybe 1, 2, and 3 on people's priority lists. So let me cover that off right away. The concern about the water quality of the Chicago River really has to do with bacteria loads, and the bacteria And I won't get into what the specific bacteria are, but it's the one that would make you sick if you
Sure.
came into contact with it. And there are lots of agencies, starting with the US EPA, that says that a certain level of bacteria is acceptable, and that's whether it's in Lake Michigan, the Chicago River, or the YMCA where you train.
Right.
And so all of those bacteria levels are set by the regulators. We monitor those bacteria levels and analogs to those bacteria levels all the time. And the MWRD does weekly testing and then has those tests performed by Argonne Labs out in the suburbs. So
yeah, they know what they're doing over there.
Yeah, it's front cabin stuff. And in addition to that, there's another nonprofit here in Chicago called Current that has utilized, now this will be their third season coming up, that has a real-time technology in the water that tests really every 15 minutes. And they're testing something a little different. It's a chemical called tryptophan, and the tryptophan then is an analog to the bacteria that is that MWRD tests. So the tryptophan levels go up and down depending on weather conditions and rain and whatever else and so forth. So the H2 Now technology is what Current uses, and the long and short of it is that we can and will be monitoring all those bacteria levels as the season progresses. And as we get close to the event day, if for some reason the bacteria levels go out of sight, we're prepared to cancel the swim. I mean, we're not going to put people in the Chicago River if it's not safe, period. And we feel like we've got some real strong, credible data providers in MWRD and H2 Now to be able to kind of call that play. So and are committed to having a safe event either way. One last comment, and I know we want to move on, but one last comment about that is that further to our comment a minute ago about how the flow of the Chicago River was reversed from its original. So now it flows from Lake Michigan down through the channels and so forth. The main stem of the river, the one that goes right through the Riverwalk, is the cleanest water that there is in the Chicago River because it's coming straight from Lake Michigan. So every time they open up those locks at under Lakeshore Drive, they let in a 250 million gallons of water, and that will also help flush the main stem. So if you look at the historic data from either of those data providers, the main stem tends to have lower bacteria levels than the north and south branch anyway.
Right, and I gotta imagine just the spectacle of people in the water swimming. Oh, I mean, I know it's something that happened 100 years ago, which we talked about earlier, that I didn't even know was a thing at a time where there was no river walk. It was just kind of the river, you know what I mean? It was just there, So
yeah.
It's really incredible that even have that conversation and all the variations of the Chicago River through the years, and
Sure.
the entire sewer system of Chicago and how it was built up around it to help accommodate all this stuff. It is an incredible thing that we could even have this conversation now. And it all goes to a good cause, ALS, which has something near and dear to your heart as well, right?
Right. ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is it's something that hit my family pretty hard. I lost my dad to ALS. He passed away in 2006, and we were thinking it was kind of a one and done catastrophe for our family. And then shortly after he passed, one of my sisters was diagnosed. And so the thing about something like ALS is, I hope like crazy you've never had the exposure to that. There is no cure. It is 100% fatal. And when somebody you love is diagnosed with it, there is this feeling of powerlessness that you just can't describe. And we wanted to do something, and particularly after Ellen was diagnosed. And so we had this crazy idea of using swimming as kind of the vehicle to raise money for ALS. The contrast, Tom, was that swimming, of course, requires that you use all your muscles all the time, while the ALS patient is gradually losing the ability to use their muscles. And sadly, what ultimately takes an ALS patient is their ability to breathe and digest food, and muscles you don't even think about. So it was Ellen who thought of the name A Long Swim. We borrowed the ALS acronym, and I was well into training at that point, but ended up doing a bunch of marathon distance swims myself. Swam the length of Tampa Bay, swam the English Channel, and so forth. But one of the swims that we did,
just small little swims, you're saying. My goodness, that's a big one.
That's no, they're real challenges, and I got hours and hours to tell about those. But the one of the swims we did was a loop around Manhattan Island in New York, and where it's a 29-mile swim, I think, and you swim through the East River, then the Harlem River, then the Hudson River. Mm-hmm. And man, is it a way to see New York City, I'll tell you. And it was just a fabulous experience, and so forth. And again, a million stories to tell about that, but it made us start to think that wow, this Chicago River thing could really be something. I mean, just like the East River or the Harlem River, it's why Chicago is here, and right. And why to be able to really celebrate those cities that way. It was the experience of a lifetime.
And I think it will be definitely an experience of a lifetime on the 22nd of September here, downtown Chicago, right? Like you said, right there on the Riverwalk, the main branch of the river, cutting literally right through the middle of the city. Right. For folks that want to learn more about this, Doug, or sign up for it, see if they can sign up for it, because I know there's not many spots left. What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, a website, Tom, ChicagoRiverswim.org. And the applications are open and will be during the month of April. We're going to kind of sift through those applications in early May, and kind of count heads then. We're hoping for 500 swimmers between the two distances, the 1 mile and the 2 mile. And it's as you say, once in a lifetime.
Absolutely. Well, Doug, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. A little history and a little, excitement for something fun in the future here in Chicago. Thanks a lot. And I wish nothing but the best for the organization to be able to swim, to raise the money to help find a cure for ALS.
That'd be great. Thanks so much, Tom. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely.
You bet.